Maxine Waters stepped onto the plane, her usual calm and confident demeanor in place. First class was her destination, a space she had flown through countless times in her career. But today something felt slightly off. As she adjusted her belongings and settled into her seat, the airline crew's attention turned toward her. At first, they didn't seem to recognize her. To them, she appeared to be just another passenger, a woman trying to find her place among the plush seats in attentive service. One flight attendant approached, clipboard in hand, and politely asked if she could move to another seat. "Excuse me, ma'am, could you please move to seat 7A?" the attendant said, pointing toward a different row. Maxine paused, a small, polite smile forming on her lips. She calmly explained, "I'm already in my assigned seat." But the crew insisted, repeating their request with slightly more urgency. Maxine complied at first, only to realize their insistence had nothing to do with seating logistics. They were simply enforcing a rule without context. Passengers around began to notice the subtle tension. Some whispered quietly, others discreetly raised their phones, sensing that something unusual was unfolding. The atmosphere, usually serene in first class, became slightly charged. Maxine, as always, remained composed. She understood the value of patience and restraint. She could have raised her voice, demanded respect, or invoked her authority immediately, but she chose a different path. Calmly, she repeated her explanation, showing her boarding pass and asserting her right to remain in her seat. The crew's insistence grew slightly sharper, their tone bordering on frustration, while Maxine's demeanor never wavered. Her poise contrasted sharply with the growing irritation of the airline staff. Passengers leaned in subtly, curious to see how the situation would unfold. They sensed the drama building, wondering, how would this end? Maxine's calmness and the crew's confusion created a tension that rippled through the cabin. What Maxine did next left everyone on the plane stunned. The stage was set. The ordinary flight had just turned into an unexpected test of composure, patience, and authority, one that would soon leave the airline crew reeling. The flight attendants continued their insistence, unaware of the higher-ranking authority seated calmly in front of them. "Ma'am, you really need to move to this seat," one of them repeated, slightly firmer this time. The words, though polite, carried a weight that implied she was being singled out unnecessarily. Maxine Waters, as composed as ever, shook her head gently. "I've already been assigned this seat," she said calmly, presenting her boarding pass once again. Her tone carried no anger, only the quiet confidence of someone used to handling tense situations. Yet the crew seemed determined to enforce a rule without understanding the full context. Around her, passengers began to take notice. Some craned their necks curiously, others whispered quietly, sensing that this interaction was unusual. Phones began to appear discreetly. A young man from New York pulled out his device, recording the interaction, while a woman from London murmured to her companion in disbelief. A couple from Tokyo exchanged worried glances but couldn't hide their curiosity. The cabin, usually filled with the soft hum of engines and muted conversations, now had a subtle tension, like everyone was collectively holding their breath. Despite the mounting attention, Maxine remained unshaken. She smiled politely, reiterating her request to stay in her seat. "I understand you're doing your job, but I have a right to remain here," she said, her voice steady, firm, yet courteous. There was no shout, no hint of confrontation, just undeniable authority conveyed through calm composure. The crew hesitated, exchanging confused glances. This was no ordinary passenger. Something about her calm insistence and unwavering demeanor made them falter for a moment, yet they still pushed forward, caught in the inertia of their initial mistake. Passengers couldn't help but watch closely. The atmosphere was thick with tension, part curiosity, part disbelief, and part anticipation. Each subtle interaction, each polite refusal from Maxine added to the suspense. Camera subtly focused on the scene, ready to capture the moment that seemed to be building toward a turning point. Some passengers whispered to each other, "Who is she? She seems so composed, and why are they treating her this way?" Others silently urged the crew to stop escalating. The disparity between Maxine's calmness and the crew's increasing insistence created an unspoken narrative of patience versus rigid authority. Finally, Maxine leaned back slightly in her seat, maintaining her poise, and looked around at the cabin. She didn't need to speak to assert herself. Her calm confidence communicated more than any words could. The crew's insistence had begun to feel awkward, almost ridiculous to the watching passengers. Have you ever been treated unfairly by staff? Comment below where you're watching this from, US, Europe, Asia, or somewhere else. We want to hear your story. The situation had now shifted from a simple seating dispute to a spectacle of restraint, authority, and quiet power. Every eye in the cabin was on Maxine Waters, wondering, how would she respond if they continued to challenge her? The stage was set for something unforgettable. The atmosphere in first class had shifted from quiet hum to subtle tension. The crew's insistence had escalated, and their frustration was starting to show. "Ma'am, please, you need to comply now," one attendant said, his tone sharper than before. It wasn't anger, but a mix of confusion and the rigid enforcement of protocol that gave the words weight. Maxine Waters, however, remained the picture of composure. She did not raise her voice or argue unnecessarily. Instead, she met the crew's eyes calmly, letting her quiet confidence do the talking. Every gesture, every slight movement, conveyed authority without aggression. She could feel the cabin's attention shift toward her. Passengers were now fully aware that something unusual was unfolding. Whispers rippled through the first-class section. A man from Chicago whispered to his neighbor, "Who is she? I've never seen anyone stay this calm under pressure." A woman from Paris subtly raised her phone, capturing a short video, while a couple from Sydney exchanged glances, their eyes wide with disbelief. Even passengers who weren't recording leaned forward, their curiosity piqued. Some passengers quietly tried to intervene. "Maybe there's been a mistake," a young woman murmured to the flight attendant, but the crew shook their heads, determined to enforce their instructions. The subtle power struggle became palpable on one side, rigid adherence to procedure; on the other, unshakable calm and quiet authority. Maxine's family, seated nearby, looked tense. They knew she had the patience to handle difficult situations, but even they couldn't help feeling the discomfort of watching the crew persist in their mistake. Yet Maxine's composed demeanor reassured them she would handle this with grace without resorting to confrontation. As the back and forth continued, the cabin itself seemed to hold its breath. Every subtle glance, every polite refusal from Maxine added to the suspense. The crew's frustration grew. They could sense that the situation was no longer straightforward. The usual dynamic of authority and compliance had been inverted, and passengers were beginning to notice. Phones were discreetly raised, videos recorded, whispers exchanged. Some passengers debated whether to speak up. Others simply watched, enthralled by the unfolding drama. The tension was almost cinematic. A quiet standoff played out in the confines of an airplane cabin, with every eye subtly focused on the calm, unyielding figure in first class. Maxine's response was simple but powerful: patience, dignity, and restraint. She did not need to escalate the situation. Her calm authority alone was enough to make the crew hesitate, reconsider, and, unbeknownst to them, set the stage for a revelation that would leave everyone stunned. If you were in Maxine's place, would you stay calm or confront the crew? Comment below. We want to know how you'd handle this situation. By now, the flight had transformed into more than just a journey from one city to another. It had become a lesson in patience, quiet power, and subtle art of handling conflict without aggression. Every passenger could feel the stakes, every camera discreetly recording the tension, waiting for the moment when the true authority of Maxine Waters would finally be revealed. The story was far from over, and the anticipation in the cabin, and now for viewers following this story, was only growing stronger. The tension in first class had reached a new level. The crew, growing increasingly frustrated, still believed they were handling an ordinary passenger. Meanwhile, subtle murmurs began to ripple through the cabin. A man near the window leaned toward his neighbor and whispered, "Wait, isn't she the FAA chief inspector?" The words spread quietly but rapidly, passing from passenger to passenger like a spark moving through dry grass. Whispers turned into quiet chatter. "I think she's the FAA chief inspector." "Are you serious?" No wonder she's so calm. Passengers began exchanging astonished glances, some pointing discreetly while trying not to draw attention from the crew. Despite the growing recognition around her, Maxine Waters remained entirely composed. Her expression was serene, almost meditative, and she continued to handle the situation with the same quiet professionalism as before. She did not smirk, boast, or assert her authority immediately. She understood the power of letting her composure speak louder than words. The crew, still unaware of who they were dealing with, continued to insist that she move. Each instruction, each repeated demand, seemed more awkward in the presence of passengers who were now aware of Maxine's position. Some crew members exchanged nervous glances, sensing that something was off but unable to identify exactly what. Meanwhile, passengers could hardly contain their astonishment. Phones discreetly recorded the unfolding drama, some ready to capture the moment when the truth would inevitably emerge. The suspense in the cabin grew. Everyone knew that the situation was about to reach a turning point. Maxine's approach was calculated, humble, and professional. She spoke politely when necessary, answering questions and maintaining her calm authority without intimidation. She understood that the real power of this moment lay not in asserting her rank immediately, but in demonstrating patience and dignity. Passengers who had recognized her tried to contain their excitement. A young woman whispered to her companion, "She's completely composed. She could have blown up at them, but she hasn't." Another passenger from Germany raised an eyebrow, impressed by the way Maxine was handling the crew's insistence. Even those who had not recognized her yet felt the weight of her presence. Her calmness had a magnetic effect, subtly commanding respect. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation. Everyone could sense that revelation was imminent. The stage had been set, a quiet standoff between rigid protocol and calm authority, with the crew unwittingly positioned on the losing side of a mistake they could not yet comprehend. Passengers' curiosity reached a peak. Their minds raced with possibilities. What will happen when they realize who she is? How will the crew react? The suspense became almost tangible, filling the cabin with a mix of anticipation, admiration, and a little anxiety for what was about to unfold. Maxine remained poised, knowing that timing and restraint were crucial. The revelation, when it came, would carry far more weight because she had allowed the crew's misunderstanding to play out fully. Every whisper, every side glance, every discreet recording set the scene perfectly. The moment that would stun everyone, the moment when the crew would finally understand who they had been treating so poorly. The stage was set for the climax, and the audience, both on the plane and those following this story, could feel the tension mounting. The truth was only moments away, and with it, a lesson in patience, authority, and dignity that would leave a lasting impression. The cabin had grown unusually quiet. Every passenger was now fully aware that something significant was unfolding. The crew, still unaware of the full scope of Maxine Waters' authority, continued to insist she comply with their repeated instructions. "Ma'am, you really need to move," one attendant said again, his voice tinged with irritation and confusion. Maxine, seated with impeccable composure, raised her hand slightly to pause the conversation. "I understand you are following procedures," she began calmly, her tone steady and measured, "but I am already in my assigned seat. I also need to make it clear that I have responsibilities and authority that you may not yet realize." A hush fell over the cabin. Passengers exchanged glances, their curiosity piqued. Atmosphere was thick with anticipation, as if everyone sensed that the moment of revelation was near. The quiet murmur of voices had turned into a tangible tension, like the pause before a storm. Maxine continued, speaking politely but with unmistakable authority. "I am the FAA Chief Inspector. I oversee airline safety and compliance, and I expect to be treated with the same respect that all passengers deserve. Asking me to move without cause is not only unnecessary but inappropriate." The effect on the cabin was immediate. Silence spread, broken only by the faint hum of the engines. Some passengers leaned forward in disbelief. Others pulled out their phones to discreetly record the historic moment. A woman from Canada whispered to her neighbor, "Did she just say she's the FAA Chief Inspector?" "Well," a man from Italy nodded slowly, eyes wide, capturing the scene on his device. The crew's expression shifted dramatically. The polite insistence, the rigid enforcement of protocol, suddenly seemed absurd in light of her revelation. Their nervous glances and hesitant movements betrayed the realization that they had been wrong. Maxine's calm authority had turned the tables without a single raised voice or dramatic gesture. Passengers were captivated. The contrast between the crew's confusion and Maxine's composed, professional demeanor created a tension that was almost cinematic. Every subtle pause, every measured word, highlighted the disparity between arrogance and poise. The cabin had become a live classroom in dignity, patience, and moral authority. Maxine did not gloat or berate the crew. She simply highlighted the mistake, pointing out the unfair treatment clearly and professionally. It is essential that all passengers are treated fairly, regardless of assumptions or appearances, she said. This is not about authority. It is about respect, fairness, and doing the right thing. Her calm yet firm command had a profound impact. The crew, now aware of their error, softened immediately, their previous frustration replaced by embarrassment and tentative compliance. Passengers watched in admiration as Maxine demonstrated that true authority does not need to shout. It speaks through clarity, confidence, and integrity. Have you ever had to stand up calmly for what's right? Comment below with your story. We want to hear how you handled it. By handling the confrontation with grace, Maxine had not only corrected the crew's behavior, but it also sent a powerful message to everyone watching. The moment transcended the boundaries of a simple airline dispute. It became a lesson in dignity, fairness, and the quiet strength that comes from knowing one's rights and responsibilities. Passengers whispered among themselves, the hum of the cabin returning but now infused with awe and respect. The crew, humbled and aware of their mistake, followed her instructions carefully. Maxine's moral stand had turned a tense confrontation into a powerful example of leadership and integrity. The stage was now perfectly set for the next pivotal moment, the full recognition and reaction of the crew and passengers, leading into the climactic revelation. The tension in first class had reached its peak. Maxine Waters had calmly asserted her authority, and now the cabin seemed to hold its collective breath, waiting for the moment of full recognition. Whispers had already begun circulating, but confirmation was still needed. A senior crew member, approaching cautiously, reviewed her boarding credentials and then looked up, eyes widening in realization. "Ma'am, you're the FIA Chief Inspector?" they asked, their voice a mix of shock and respect. The words, simple as they were, cut through the remaining tension in the cabin like a lightning strike. Instantly, the airline crew who had been insisting on her moving froze. Their confident stance crumbled as they finally understood the gravity of the situation. The polite but firm instructions they had been issuing moments earlier now felt absurd, faces flushed with embarrassment, some averting their gaze, others trying to mask their mortification. Their persistence, based on a mistaken assumption, had been met with unwavering composure, and now the full weight of their error became painfully clear. Passengers reacted immediately. Soft murmurs turned into murmured exclamations of astonishment. Phones were discreetly lifted, cameras recording the historic moment. A man from New York clapped quietly, while a woman from Tokyo smiled, shaking her head in disbelief. By the time the applause spread through the cabin, it became a chorus of admiration for Maxine's poise, dignity, and professionalism. Yet Maxine did not revel in the embarrassment of others. Instead, she used the moment as a teaching opportunity. Calmly, she addressed the cabin and the crew. It is crucial that everyone, passengers and staff alike, is treated with fairness and respect. Assumptions, mistakes, and biases can easily escalate if not checked. Today, we were able to resolve this situation with patience and professionalism. Her words were measured, powerful, and instructive. The message resonated with everyone present. Authority is not about aggression, and respect is earned through composure, clarity, and integrity. The crew nodded, humbled by the experience, and their previous frustration gave way to a genuine acknowledgement of her professionalism. Passengers' admiration grew even further as Maxine continued to handle the situation gracefully. No gloating, no anger, only calm authority, and a clear example of leadership in action. It was a lesson in restraint, showing that true power lies in how one handles conflict with dignity. Engagement break. Have you ever witnessed someone being treated unfairly and standing up for themselves? Share your story below. We want to hear your experiences. By the time the senior crew member confirmed her identity and passengers began applauding, the incident had shifted from a simple seating dispute to a lesson in respect, fairness, and patience. Under pressure, Maxine's calm intervention and moral clarity had transformed an awkward confrontation into a memorable example of leadership and composure. The stage was now set for the final part, the viral aftermath, where the story spreads beyond the cabin and leaves a lasting impression on viewers and passengers alike. The drama had reached its climax, but its impact would continue to ripple far beyond the plane. By the time the plane landed, the story of Maxine Waters' calm and composed handling of the airline crew had already begun to ripple far beyond the cabin. Passengers shared videos, whispered details to friends and family, and posted short clips online. Within hours, social media accounts were flooded with the story. People from across the world were praising Maxine for her dignity, patience, and professional approach to a tense situation. The incident quickly went viral. Hashtags like #respect and dignity, #FAA Chief Inspector, and #leadership in action trended across platforms. Millions of viewers marveled at her calm authority, contrasting sharply with the crew's earlier insistence. Comment sections filled with admiration and awe. People were inspired not only by her position, but by how gracefully she handled the confrontation. Some wrote personal stories of times they had faced unfair treatment, connecting with the lesson Maxine had exemplified. Meanwhile, the airline faced scrutiny. The crew involved were subjected to internal review, and management had to publicly address the incident. Social media commentary pointed out mistakes made, emphasizing the importance of training, awareness, and treating every passenger with fairness. Though embarrassing, the moment sparked a conversation about professionalism, biases, and how authority is exercised not only within airlines but across workplaces globally. Yet, despite the sudden worldwide attention, Maxine remained poised. She did not use the viral fame to belittle the crew. Instead, she highlighted the bigger lesson. Respect, patience, and calmness under pressure are far more powerful than confrontation or aggression. Her approach resonated universally. Viewers, passengers, and employees alike could see the value in addressing unfair situations with dignity rather than anger. People praised the subtle but clear way she handled the confrontation. She had taken a potentially humiliating scenario and turned it into a teaching moment, demonstrating that leadership is not about asserting dominance, but about inspiring respect through conduct. Impact was undeniable. A simple airplane dispute had become a global example of professionalism and integrity. Maxine's story reminded everyone watching that authority does not require aggression. Calm, measured, and respectful actions often speak louder than forceful commands. Remaining composed, even when wronged, can turn tense situations into opportunities for teaching, learning, and growth. If you believe everyone deserves fair treatment, type respect in the comments and subscribe for more eye-opening stories like this one. Share this story to inspire others to handle conflict with dignity and patience. The viral reach of the story ensured that Maxine's lesson would extend far beyond the cabin. From first-class passengers to viewers around the globe, people were reminded that patience, respect, and professional integrity are timeless values, ones that can diffuse tension, command authority, and inspire admiration everywhere. The story ended not with anger or revenge, but with understanding, humility, and a lasting lesson. True power lies in composure, and fairness should guide every interaction, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant.